7 extinct animals that might still be alive. Part 1. Every few years, science makes a mistake it has to take back. The coelacanth, a prehistoric fish believed extinct for 65 million years, was found alive in 1938, pulled from the Indian Ocean by a fisherman who had no idea what he was holding. The Chacoan peccary, declared extinct, was rediscovered in 1975 living in the forests of Paraguay. The New Guinea Highland wild dog, written off by science, was photographed alive in 2016. The list goes on. And every time it happens, the same question follows. If these animals survived without us knowing, what else is still out there? Tonight we have 7 animals that science declared extinct. 7 species that officially no longer exist. And 7 reasons to believe that, somewhere in the world's remaining wild places, the story might not be over yet. Animal number 1, the thylacine. The last known thylacine died on September 7, 1936, in Hobart Zoo, Tasmania. His name was Benjamin. He died alone, locked outside his enclosure on a cold night, overlooked by a keeper who forgot to let him in. The species had been hunted to near extinction by European settlers who blamed the animal, incorrectly as it turned out, for killing livestock. The Tasmanian government paid a bounty for every thylacine killed. By the time anyone thought to protect them, it was too late. Benjamin died, and with him, officially, the last of his kind. Except the sightings never stopped. Since 1936, there have been over 3,800 reported sightings of thylacines in Tasmania and mainland Australia. Not all of them are credible, but some are. In 1982, a wildlife ranger named Hans Narding spent 3 hours watching what he described with absolute certainty as a thylacine in the Tasmanian wilderness. A large striped animal with the distinctive stiff tail and rigid gait that no other species shares. He filed an official report. The Tasmanian government launched a covert search. They found nothing. But Narding never changed his account. In 2021, researchers from the University of Melbourne released a peer-reviewed study concluding that suitable thylacine habitat still exists across Tasmania and parts of mainland Australia, and that the species, if small populations survived, would have the resources to persist. Trail cameras have been deployed in remote areas. In 2023, a team reported possible thylacine footage in Queensland. Blurry, inconclusive, but not dismissible. DNA technology has advanced to the point where a full thylacine genome has been sequenced, and de-extinction research is actively underway. Does the thylacine really still exist? Officially, no. But Tasmania is still wild in ways that most people don't fully appreciate. And Benjamin, it turns out, may not have been the last. Animal number 2, the ivory-billed woodpecker. It was called the Lord God bird because that's what people said when they saw one. Lord God, look at that bird. The largest woodpecker in North America, nearly the size of a crow, with a brilliant white bill and a cry that echoed through the old-growth forests of the American South like something prehistoric. It needed old trees, ancient, dead, specifically the kind of massive rotting hardwoods that take centuries to produce. When those forests were logged in the 19th and early 20th centuries, the ivory bill went with them. The last universally accepted sighting was in Louisiana in 1944. The species was declared extinct in 1994. Then, in 2004, a kayaker named Gene Sparling reported seeing a large woodpecker with white markings on its wings in the Cache River National Wildlife Refuge in Arkansas, a swampy, remote stretch of bottomland forest that had been quietly regrowing for decades. He mentioned it online. Ornithologists read the post. Within weeks, a team from Cornell University was in Arkansas. They made video recordings. They recorded audio that matched known ivory bill calls. The Cornell team, after months of analysis, published a paper in the journal Science in 2005 announcing the ivory-billed woodpecker had been rediscovered. The announcement made international news.
To announce a discovery
the U.S.
of
government pledged $10 million for conservation efforts.
Woodpecker has been
the scientific community then did what it does.
Here. It matches
argued.
The field notes exactly.
Other ornithologists reviewed the footage and disputed the identification, suggesting the bird was a pileated woodpecker, a similar but less spectacular species. The debate has never been fully resolved. In 2021, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service moved to officially declare the ivory bill extinct. But researchers in Louisiana and Arkansas disagreed, submitting their own evidence of continued sightings. The forests of the American South are still there. They are still growing back. And something was in that Arkansas swamp in 2004. The argument about what it was has never actually ended. Animal number 3, the Javan tiger. The island of Java in Indonesia is one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Over 150 million people live there. Its forests have been cleared for agriculture, development, and industry for over a century. And yet, in what remains of those forests, in the remote highland regions and the patches of protected jungle that cling to the island's volcanic slopes, people have never stopped reporting tigers. The Javan tiger was declared extinct in the 1980s. The last confirmed sighting was in 1976. But the local communities who live near the forests have consistently reported encounters in the decades since, with a precision and consistency that wildlife researchers find difficult to entirely dismiss. The Javan tiger was a distinct subspecies, smaller than the Bengal tiger, with narrower stripes and a more slender build, adapted specifically to the island's dense jungle environment. At its peak, it ranged across all of Java. By the mid-20th century, intensive hunting and habitat destruction had reduced it to a handful of individuals in the most remote protected areas. The last confirmed evidence, tracks, kill sites, hair samples, dates from the 1970s.
We finally have confirmation.
But in 2019, a wildlife camera in the Ujung Kulon National Park captured footage of a large striped animal that a number of researchers flagged as potentially consistent with a Javan tiger. The image was inconclusive. Analysis continues. In 2022, a resident near the Ujung Kulon Peninsula found what appeared to be tiger scratch marks on a tree and a single hair. The hair was sent for DNA analysis. The results came back as consistent with Panthera tigris, tiger, but the sample was too degraded for subspecies identification. It could have been a Javan tiger. It could have been something else. What it could not have been was nothing. Something made those marks. Something left that hair. Java is smaller than it once was, and its wild places are fragmented and shrinking, but they are not gone. And neither, perhaps, is everything that lives in them. Animal number 4, the Caribbean monk seal. Christopher Columbus encountered them on his second voyage to the Americas in 1494, and recorded them in his log with a kind of casual brutality that explains everything that followed. His crew killed 8 of them for food. They called them sea wolves. They were easy to approach, completely unafraid of humans, a trait that, in the centuries of hunting that followed, would prove to be a fatal one. The Caribbean monk seal was hunted for its oil, killed by fishermen who blamed it for competing with their catches, and driven from beach after beach as human development swallowed the coastlines it depended on. The last confirmed sighting was in 1952 at Serenila Bank between Jamaica and Honduras. In 2008, after a 5-year dedicated search found nothing, the species was officially declared extinct, the only seal species to go extinct in recorded history due to human causes. But the Caribbean is a large and complex place, and its less visited waters are less visited than most people assume. Since the official declaration, there have been scattered reports from fishermen and divers in remote areas of the Gulf of Mexico and the waters around the Yucatan Peninsula. Animals that didn't match any known seal species present in those waters. None of these reports produced photographs or physical evidence. All of them were dismissed officially. But the waters around Cuba, Haiti, and the smaller Caribbean islands contain stretches of coastline and underwater geography that remain genuinely underexplored. And the Caribbean monk seal's closest living relative, the Mediterranean monk seal, has demonstrated a remarkable capacity to persist in tiny hidden populations in remote coastal caves, undetected for years. Here's what makes the Caribbean monk seal's case different from simple wishful thinking. Monk seals are coastal animals, not deep ocean species. They need beaches and shallow water. They need to be seen. And yet, the Mediterranean monk seal, once thought extinct across most of its range, keeps reappearing in places where no one thought to look. The Caribbean had those places too. Some of them are still there. Whether anything is still in them is a question that has not been answered with the certainty that the official record suggests. Animal number 5. The Formosan clouded leopard, Taiwan's indigenous peoples, the Bunin, the Rukai, the Paiwan, have stories about the clouded leopard that go back centuries.
We must carry them forward.
They called it the likulau. They respected it. Some groups considered its skin sacred, reserved for the garments of tribal leaders. The animal was real, documented by Western science in the early 20th century, known to haunt the mountain forests of southern Taiwan with the patience and silence that defines the clouded leopard family. Then the forests shrank. Hunting pressure increased. By the mid-20th century, confirmed sightings had become rare. By the late 20th century, they had stopped. In 2013, after 13 years of camera traps placed throughout the animal's former range produced no images, a team of zoologists formally declared the Formosan clouded leopard extinct. 6 years later, in 2019, rangers in the Alangi indigenous area on Taiwan's southeastern coast reported seeing a clouded leopard climbing a tree and hunting goats on 2 separate occasions.
We are merely the guardians.
The rangers were
of
from
this
the
land,
local Paiwan community, people whose ancestors had known this animal for generations. People who had no reason to invent it and every reason to recognize it. Their accounts were detailed, consistent, and credible. The reports reached Taiwan's Forest Bureau. Researchers returned to the area. They found no physical evidence. But the community's testimony has not been dismissed, and the area where the sightings occurred is remote, rugged, and not thoroughly surveyed by the earlier camera trap studies. The broader clouded leopard family, Neophilus, is one of the most elusive groups of large cats on Earth. Individuals can occupy enormous territories while leaving almost no detectable trace. Camera trap studies have repeatedly found clouded leopard populations in areas where the animals were thought to be absent, simply because the cameras were placed in the wrong locations. Taiwan's eastern mountain forests are steep, densely vegetated, and difficult to access. 13 years of camera traps covered a fraction of the available habitat. The Paiwan Rangers saw what they saw, and the likulau, if it persists anywhere, would persist exactly where they said it was, in the most remote and least visited corner of an island that hasn't finished giving up its secrets. Animal number 6, the passenger pigeon. At its peak, the passenger pigeon was the most numerous bird in North America, possibly the most numerous bird in the world. Flocks so large they darkened the sky for days as they passed. John James Audubon described watching a single flock pass overhead for 3 days without interruption. Estimates of the total population range from 3 to 5 billion individuals. They were so numerous, so overwhelming in their sheer numbers, that the idea of their extinction seemed genuinely impossible. There were too many of them. Nature couldn't lose that many birds. And then it did. In less than 50 years, through a combination of commercial hunting on an industrial scale and the destruction of the old-growth forests they depended on, the passenger pigeon went from billions to 0. The last one, a female named Martha, died at the Cincinnati Zoo on September 1st, 1914. There is no credible evidence that the passenger pigeon survived beyond 1914. Unlike the other animals in tonight's video, This is not a story about possible survivors in remote wilderness. The passenger pigeon is gone. Martha was the last. But the passenger pigeon's story belongs in tonight's video for a different reason, because it is the most powerful argument for why the other 6 entries should be taken seriously. If 5 billion animals could disappear in 50 years, then a small remnant population of thylacines or ivory-billed woodpeckers could survive in a patch of remote wilderness without leaving a trace. Extinction can happen faster than anyone expects. And persistence, the stubborn, quiet continuation of a species in a hidden corner of the world, can happen just as invisibly. Here's what makes the passenger pigeon story relevant today in a very concrete way. De-extinction research focused on the passenger pigeon is among the most advanced in the world. The company Colossal Biosciences has announced a formal project to resurrect the passenger pigeon using its closest living relative, the band-tailed pigeon, and CRISPR gene editing technology. The target date for a living specimen is the early 2030s. Martha died in 1914. She may not be the end of the story after all. Animal number 7, the bush dog of the eastern seaboard. This one is different from the others. Not a famous extinction. Not a beloved species that made international headlines when it disappeared. The eastern timber wolf, the subspecies Canis lupus lycaon, in its original coastal and Piedmont form, was eliminated from the eastern seaboard of North America so gradually, so completely, and so long ago that most people don't know it existed as a distinct population. By the early 20th century, wolves had been eradicated from every eastern state south of Canada. The last wolves in Pennsylvania were killed in the 1890s, the last in the Carolinas in the early 1900s. They disappeared not with a famous last animal and a recorded date, but with the quiet inevitability of something that had simply been killed everywhere it was found. But here's what happened next, and it's the part that wildlife biologists are still arguing about. Beginning in the 1990s, large canid animals began appearing in the eastern United States. Animals bigger than coyotes, with different skull shapes, different behaviors, different howls. Farmers in rural Pennsylvania, New York, and New England started reporting animals that didn't match anything in the official record. Wildlife researchers captured some of them. DNA analysis revealed something unexpected. These animals, now called eastern coyotes or coy wolves, carried significant wolf DNA. Not just coyote, wolf. The genetic signal of the eastern timber wolf, absorbed through decades of hybridization as the wolf retreated northward and interbred with coyotes moving in from the west. The eastern timber wolf, in its pure historical form, is gone, but its DNA is not. It persists in a hybrid population that is currently expanding across the eastern United States, a population that is behaviorally different from western coyotes, more wolf-like in its hunting strategies and social structure, and occupying an ecological niche that has been empty since the original wolves were killed.
This population
Is that extinction?
Extinct.
Biologists genuinely disagree.
We are already there.
The genes survived. The behavior survived. The animal that carries them looks different and arrived differently than anyone expected. But it is there. And in the forests of the eastern seaboard, something is howling again. 7 animals, 7 official extinctions, and 7 open questions that science hasn't fully closed. The pattern repeats itself too often to ignore. A species disappears from the record, decades pass, and then someone in a remote forest or a deep ocean trench finds something that shouldn't be there. We declared the coelacanth gone for 65 million years. We were wrong. We declared these 7 gone too. And the world is still large enough, still wild enough, still dark enough in the right places that we may yet be wrong about them as well. The next video is already waiting. And trust us, we're just getting started.